Welcome, Mark Robinson, Storm Hunter, the Weather Network. How are you today, sir?
Good. How you doing, Chris?
Doing all right. I stole this biography off of the Weather Network's site, Mark. You're a multi-platform meteorologist at the Weather
Oh my goodness.
Network.
Yes.
Multi. You can juggle platforms. This is good. You co-host the television series Storm Hunters and Unearthed. You've appeared on Angry Planet, and you've made numerous other media appearances. You can be followed on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Storm Hunter TWN. Wow, this is good. This is good. Um, let's start
Yeah.
by finding out a bit about you.
Well, I mean, I have been interested in the natural world, my entire life. As a kid, my parents had a whole set of science books that I used to like just go through constantly. So I was the giant nerd, that had the science books and everything else. But at the same time, I did love a little bit of adventure. Yeah, I've sort of folded all of that together, and now I wander around for the Weather Network, basically following storms, jumping into volcanoes, and doing all sorts of things that you probably shouldn't.
Yeah, yeah. Bit of an adventurer. What about education? Where'd you go to school?
Oh, I went to school. My first degree I got from the University of Guelph in wildlife biology.
Hmm.
I ended up not have there's not a lot of jobs for that. I ended up in office work, absolutely going nuts. And I ended up going back to school on the advice of a friend of mine, Dr. David Sills,
Hmm.
who encouraged me on our storm chase down to Oklahoma in 2004, I believe it was. I went back to school for atmospheric science and ended up with a meteorology degree.
Oh, wonderful. So
Yep.
Dave Sills. Wow.
Yep.
Northern Tornadoes Project out of Western.
Yep. Introduced me to my wife, little things like that. So,
Wow. Oh, I did
yeah.
not know that. Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
small
No,
world.
yeah. Dave and I met, God, it probably was 2002, right after I found out that you could actually chase tornadoes in Ontario. I had no
Yes.
idea. And
Yes.
the movie Twister was the one that sort of I went, oh, that looks like a lot of fun. Um, and I was working at the University of Guelph at the time.
Yeah.
And I just one day said, okay, that's really cool. Found out you could do it and went running after a storm, having zero idea what I was
Well,
doing.
that's a good idea.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And my very first tornado was that year. And I literally chased it from Guelph to Campbellville. And that was my very first tornado. Was sort of began here in Guelph.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
Um, I've been chasing for over 20 years. Uh, here's my Environment Canada ID right there.
Oh, I have one of those too. Yep.
I'm hoping if I'm ever chasing and a cop tries to pull me over, I can just flash him, flash this and try to get out of a speeding ticket. I don't know.
Uh,
Just
I've gotten caught for speeding. Where was I? It was Oklahoma, and I went whipping through the town, got to the other side of the town, realized that I was going too fast when the cop car was coming towards me, and I saw him pull a Yui, and I just pulled the car over.
oh,
I knew I looked down the speed. I went, yeah, pulled it over. He came up behind me and he jumped out and said, he's like, you know what? I really appreciate the fact that you realized you were going too fast and you pulled over. And he said, I really appreciate that. So I'm not going to give you a ticket. Just can you keep your speed down when you go through my town? And he said, you've got a radio there. Can you just let all your friends know that please keep the storm chasing guys, a little slower through my town? Because it's a
ah,
little dangerous. You guys are going through here too fast. And I was like, no problem, no problem. I said to him, do you want my wallet and like my ID and stuff like that? And he's like, no, I won't need that. And I said, okay, that's fine, and off he went. Um, what I didn't know was that one of my friends had decided to play a little joke on me and had hid my wallet inside the car, so I couldn't find my wallet. And meanwhile, I am not American and had no ID. It was very, it was very, very funny because when I turned the radio sound, I was like, "Hey guys, I took the radio. I said, "Guys, I'm getting pulled over here. I'll catch up when you catch up." And then I turned the radio down. What I didn't know is they were yelling at each other at the radio that I had no idea,
Ah,
and that it
classic.
had been hidden in my other friend's car who was with us. So it was, yeah, it was one of those things.
Wow. And was
Yeah,
it a local cop, state trooper?
yeah, local cop.
Local cop.
Yeah, just local cop, and we had a chat with him, and I mean we have a pretty good relationship, with the general any sort of police departments,
Hmm.
because we let them know what's going on.
Oh, good.
And when I was in Hurricane Gustav, I believe it was, that was coming from New Orleans, we ended up outside of New Orleans, and we ended up in a town where we were literally helping the police schedule their run through the town,
Mm,
after evacuation, because they literally were watching our radar to sort of see when the bands would pass by, and then we would time. Okay, you guys have got 15
yeah.
minutes to send a patrol out, and we were literally just scheduling the until it got really really bad. But we literally helped them schedule their patrols through the town. So
Right, right,
generally
right.
pretty good relationship.
And Oklahoma,
Yeah,
the number one state for F5s?
I believe so. Yeah.
Mm,
I mean, I mean, I've seen the aftermath of at least one EF5 in Oklahoma and more in 2013.
okay.
2013 was one of the most intense years I've ever had
Hmm.
chasing
Hmm.
in the Great Plains.
Is everything
Because
now EF rather than F? Is everything enhanced
yes,
Fujita? Okay. So maybe we
everything
should
is,
tell the folks a bit about
yeah,
tornado scales and what
yeah,
F and EF means when we use these terms. So we start at 0 and go to 5, correct?
yeah, yeah, it is
And it,
correct.
and it used to be just F0 to F5, and now it's EF because what? They've gotten bigger, or
No, no.
why have they enhanced it? Yeah.
Yeah, the original scale was developed by Ted Fujita. That's why it's an F scale.
Yeah,
And Ted was going. He was a hurricane researcher. I don't know how much. You probably know all this, but the audience might not.
that's right.
Um, Ted was a hurricane researcher who sort of took a look at stuff and was like, oh, this is the best way to sort of classify how strong a tornado is, because we can't necessarily get a radar on the storm, so we can't necessarily get the exact wind speed. So we can sort of take a look at what engineering like how these buildings were built, and then sort of figure out the wind speed, sort of back figuring it out.
Hmm.
And then in the last, I believe, I can't remember when it started exactly, but there was a lot more engineering work done on like wind, basically just sort of wind engineering, looking at buildings, how they came apart, and basically the scale was refined, not so much increased or anything like that, just refined.
Right.
And they call that the enhanced Fujita scale,
Okay.
because we now know much better about how buildings hold together, and what
For
happens.
sure.
And we've seen, and I've been through the damage path with Dave at the Northern Tornadoes Project, and we've literally seen why, some are classified EF3, EF2s. The Barry tornado, we had to take a real close look at that one, because it looked like it was EF4 damage, but it wasn't, because the buildings were very badly put together.
Ah,
And it was done very cheaply and not up to code. And if it was up to code, it would have been, EF4, but because it wasn't up to code, it was dropped, because you could take a very close look and say, hey, there's not enough, not enough screws, there's not enough bolts, there's not enough this.
mm,
It was done poorly. And so the buildings came apart much easier than they should have. And therefore, the damage was lowered, or like the scale of it was lowered. And that's
okay.
simply because we just know more about wind engineering, and how these things come apart.
Hmm. Hmm. Now, you and I are familiar with this, but maybe the average public doesn't realize that, 98% of our work ends in no spotting of a tornado. So you go
Yeah,
out in the
yeah,
hopes, right? Um,
yeah.
how do you read a sky and position yourself? So take us through an average storm chasing day. What do you do? And
Well, I
how
mean,
does that unfold?
on my average storm chasing day, I've got a little bit of an advantage over most people.
Yes.
uh, that being that I can always talk to everybody, all the meteorologists back at the Weather Network,
Hmm.
because my chase days are my active weather days. Back when it was a hobby, it was all up to me and maybe a couple of friends.
Right.
Now, because I'm working for the Weather Network, and trying to get out there for active weather, we often, the morning starts off sometimes at 4 o'clock in the morning, because that's when we do our first briefings at 4 a.m., 4:30 a.m. So we'll sort of look through, sort of take a look at what's going on. I'll talk to the meteorologist on the desk, and we'll sort of hash out okay, we've got a basic idea of what's going on today. Okay, it does look good. Well, maybe it doesn't look so good. So we're trying to figure out from there. At that point, I'll take a nap. And the meteorologist will continue to work.
Hmm.
Uh, or if I have to be really, really far, I'll start putting gear in the car and start getting ready to go.
Right.
Generally, right now, I'm staying in the Southern Ontario region. So it's never, I don't really have to go that far because it's either, 4 hours to say Ottawa or 5 hours to Ottawa and 3 hours down to Windsor. So
Right.
there's sort of, we can balance it that way. And what I'll do though is I'll take a very careful look at, what the models are saying, what the short range models are saying.
Hmm.
But more importantly, day of, I'm really looking at what the atmosphere is actually doing. So at the atmosphere, if it's, the models are saying one thing, but I look at it and say, you know what, there's a lot more energy that's coming in today. There's more, the clouds have cleared off more, so therefore there's that much more heating. I
Mm.
think the storms are going to do this. Or, if it's like, oh, I take a look at it and say, oh, you know what, the clouds have come in too much. We're just not going to get something. Or the front slowed down. So really understanding the atmosphere in the morning and throughout the day is absolutely critical. Now,
Right.
if everything's going the way I want it to, which means that the storms are actually going to do something, then at that point, all the gear goes into the car. I get ready to go. Quite often, again, this is a bit of a change from a hobby point of view. Um, I'll actually be doing the live morning show, talking about what may happen in Southern Ontario
Yeah.
that
Right.
day. Yeah, like yesterday when we were looking at the remnants of Beryl coming through. I was up at 5 o'clock in the morning getting ready for taking a look at doing everything, but at the same time, I did the whole morning show that morning, and we were talking about what do we expect to see, what's going to happen, potentially going to happen. Once that's all done, then I might have a little bit of time to sort of go back through, take a look at some more forecasting models, or in some cases, just right in the car and off I go to wherever I need to be. And usually I'll have a town picked out or an area picked out. So it might be like, oh, today I'm going to go to Grand Bend. That's where I'm expecting things. So out I go to Grand Bend. And then there's usually a lot of sitting around and waiting.
Yes.
you know. And
Yes.
so I'll be waiting for the storms to go up. At the same time, sending back footage or sending back little snippets of me talking about what's going on or what I'm seeing for the day to go back to the weather network that might go on air, might go on digital, sort of, what have you. At the same time, also communicating with the meteorologist. We're still hashing things out. Oh yeah, we're seeing this, that, and the other thing. And then once the storms start to go, things get very busy.
I bet.
Uh,
I bet.
you know,
Now
yeah,
tell us about your equipment. You got a car? They give you a car to drive around
yeah,
in? Yeah.
yeah. I mean, we actually just, and here I get to do a little shameless, well, not self promotion, but promotion for Mitsubishi.
Mm.
We recently got new Mitsubishi Outlanders for storm chasing.
Nice.
The Weather Network made a deal, and now I have a new brand new
Oh, cool. We'll
2024.
put up a picture of that.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's great. And it's I've been driving it. It's been through a few chases this year. Really liking it. Really good. Lots of room. And so in that I've got power inverters. I've got multiple sets of cameras so I can film forward, but I can also switch. There's like a little switching box right beside the console that I can then switch to the rear facing camera. So
Mm.
as I'm driving. I also have something we call a DiCarlo box, which is a Canadian company out of Waterloo, and that allows us to do live TV. So I'll be doing live TV as we're driving down the road, as I'm explaining what's going on,
Oh,
and
cool.
then I can switch. You can see the front view, the rear view, and really sort of get an idea of get that information, get all that footage back to the Weather Network real time.
Yeah,
It's been really quite fantastic. I mean, a
good.
lot of chasers are doing it. They're streaming to YouTube or etc. But we have to sort of up that a little bit. So we're sort of streaming in 4K back to the weather network.
Mm,
Um, so it takes a little bit more equipment, but it's also harder to do. So there's a balance there. Some chasers I know have like 5 or 6 cameras in their car, but they're only streaming in 480, which means that there's not a lot of data going back. Whereas where I'm streaming, it's a lot of data, so it's a much more difficult to keep that signal and get that getting back to the weather network.
right, right. Any protection on the car? Any hail
Yep,
protection? Oh, you do?
yep. Oh yes. The Outlander has a very large sunroof. And I know that like even golf balls will take that out. So I built a whole hail shield on top of the car,
Nice.
just to ensure that it doesn't get taken out. But because I can't drill into it or do anything like that, it can easily be taken off or put on. So yeah, I
Mm,
do have some protection
hmm hmm
for flying debris
Oh,
and golf
good.
ball and bigger hail.
Now, one of the things I tell, family, friends, various people who are interested in tornado chasing and that sort of thing is if it's June, July, and August and there's a thunderstorm and there's hail, maybe that's a pretty good time to be thinking that something could be brewing because, correct me if I'm wrong, in order for there to be hail, water has to fall and then get sucked back, like a raindrop gets sucked back up,
Well,
and then it freezes and then it comes back down.
it's funny. We actually just did what we call science behind the weather
Oh,
segment on that. There's a couple of competing theories about hail production.
okay.
One of them is that one is that sort of like
The
optimal,
mesocyclonic kind of.
yeah, which we actually think is not correct anymore.
Really?
So now, yeah, now we're thinking there's a sort of a stronger competing theory that says that as the hailstone, the building hailstone passes through sort of goes up the updraft, but the environment within a thunderstorm is not uniform. You have some areas of dry deposition and some areas of wet
Right.
deposition, and that's where you get your layers because it's just passing and maybe it's doing a bit of a cycle,
Hmm.
but it's not sort of doing the, bounce
Yeah,
up
that
and
was
down
the
below.
old theory was that it keeps going
Yeah,
up and
was it?
down.
Yeah, like there's a freezing level that's absolute right there,
Yeah.
but that may not be true. So we're sort of saying that what would more likely is varying environments
Mm,
as it passes through this and
interesting.
then eventually gets dumped out the out of the outflow. So it's not as it's sort of we're sort of accepting the fact that like everything isn't as uniform as we like to think within
Right.
that storm. And that's only because, and we only know that because of the amount of research that's being done on and the increasingly good instrumentation,
Yes.
radar, etc. As we improve the radar systems, we can see inside these storms better and better,
Hmm.
and realizing that it's a far more complex environment than we originally thought.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Um,
But that hail production, the reason I always say is as soon as you start getting a lot of hail in there, be prepared for a lot of lightning because that hail is gives you that separation of
that
charges.
charge. Yes.
Yeah. So you'll get the separation into positive and negative areas throughout the cloud. And
Hmm.
then you get cloud to cloud, but at the same time, it's also inducing a charge in the ground as it passes over.
That's
So
right.
now you're getting the cloud to ground, the more
Yeah.
dangerous strikes.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
all of this sort of I always say as soon as you see a lot of hail, you're gonna see a lot of lightning
You're
real
going to see
soon.
some
If it's not,
action
yeah, you're gonna see some action.
for sure. For sure. Now, I was working on a hypothesis back in the 90s where I thought there seems to be more tornadoes. Could, we
Hmm.
called it global warming back then. Could global warming
Yeah,
be extending Tornado Alley up into southern Ontario? Do the Great Lakes have an effect like the Gulf of Mexico and the mountains, create that perfect condition down in the
yeah.
US Tornado Alley? What are your thoughts on on that phenomenon? Are there more tornadoes or we just have more cell phones now? There are these,
It's definitely a combination. Again, there's with anything meteorological, there is a it's there's the answer is It's complex.
Hmm.
But I mean, there's two. I mean, the way I break it down is there's two basic answers. One is that everyone has cell phones,
Yes.
which means we're getting more and more data. We're finding the tornadoes and we're catching the tornadoes that we didn't necessarily know were happening. They were always happening, but we're now sort of getting photographic and proof of these things.
Hmm.
A good example was actually yesterday. There was somebody shot what looks to be a tornado directly over London in Ontario, um, and we sort of went, um, and there was no damage, no nothing. But when you look at it, and I think Dave is investigating this one, it looks very much like a tornado, but it also could have been a little bit of scud being pulled up into the
Yeah.
updraft.
Yeah.
So we don't really know, but that's something like if it wasn't for a cell phone, nobody would have caught this. Nobody would have had
You're
good,
right.
really good photography of it or
You're
video
right.
of it. So definitely that's a big part of it. The other half of it is we now have GIS. This is still on the instrumentation side of things. GIS is allowing us to track down tornado damage in areas where I don't care how many cell phones you've got, nobody's up there, which is that northwestern Ontario area. And with new radars up there, we're now discovering that there are some major tornadoes happening up there, equivalent EF5s that are happening in
Really?
northwestern Ontario. Yeah,
Really? Like north of
that are
Kenora or?
yeah, way up there, like close to
Oh,
James Bay kind of thing. And these
interesting.
are these are 75 kilometers long, kilometer wide damage tracks. These are
Really?
major, major tornadoes that are happening in northwestern Ontario. We had no idea. So now what we've found and what we're sort of seeing, and again, Dave can, I just did a story with Dave talking about this, is that Ontario now seems to be the capital province for tornadoes in Canada. We used to sort of think it was Saskatchewan, maybe Manitoba, but now, as it turns out, it's Ontario.
Hmm.
And that's partly because we are, and this is going to jump into part two of this when we talk about climate change. We are seeing an increase in tornadoes in the east. So we're seeing more and more tornadoes in the northeastern part of the United States and the northeastern part of the continent, which includes Southern Ontario, etc.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, if again, we're going to go back to the remnants of Beryl as it came through Southern Ontario, came through the Northeast. There were a tremendous number of tornado warnings from this one. This remnants sparked off an absolute ton of tornadoes. If that low had gone 50 kilometers more north than it had. Yesterday, there would have been a tornado outbreak in southern Ontario,
Is that
and
right?
and likely have been major damage, because there were some very strong tornadoes that went through
Yes.
parts of New York and Pennsylvania and Ohio. And I literally was watching the storm that was producing a tornado just on the other side of Buffalo. I was sitting in Fort Erie watching this thing going, oh, like it was that close.
Wow.
But yeah, so we are seeing that shift towards us. There's definite evidence that Tornado Alley is shifting from sort of Kansas, Oklahoma, Nebraska, Texas towards places like Indiana, Missouri, Michigan,
Yes.
Ohio, Southern Ontario. We are definitely a part of Tornado Alley. But I mean, we're the like the ones that get very little, but now our numbers are beginning to increase. However, having said all that,
Hmm.
the Great Lakes make a massive difference when it comes to tornado formation, protection from tornadoes. Quite often, you'll see, especially in the early spring, when the lakes are still very, very cold, you'll see the storms ripping through Ohio and Michigan straight towards southern Ontario, producing tornadoes. And as soon as they get over the cold lakes, gone. They get cut off from their source of heat and moisture,
Right.
and they die off. Having said that, we also get more thunderstorms in southern Ontario because of those lakes. They produce what we call lake breezes, which are basically miniature cold fronts that sort of extend inland a little bit, and we can often see thunderstorms popping up along those lake breezes on those hot, humid, hazy
That's
days
right.
in, say, July and August. We will see those lake breezes go up.
Mhm.
They're also a major focal point for thunderstorm formation and thunderstorm enhancement.
Yes, that's
And
right.
it'll be something that I always watch for. As soon as you see those storms that are sort of maybe not too great hit the lake breeze, up they go and away they go. At that point, sort of the brakes come off and the storms get going.
Yeah.
So quite often I'll pick the Lake Erie breezes. If I know where those Lake Erie breezes are, just go there and wait for the storms to happen.
Mm.
Um, so that's why I spend a lot of time in Exeter and Mitchell
Oh, is that
because
right?
you have the Huron breeze and then you have the Lake Erie breeze. And if those two connect,
Yep.
right there is where the storms are going to go every single time. There's just
Interesting.
no question. They always go there. Yeah.
Interesting. And have you ever witnessed, like, I know Lake Huron's big for like water spouts in the fall and things like that.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen a water spout form and then come to land and then transition?
Well, I mean, again, when you talk about water spouts versus tornadoes, you have to be a little bit careful,
Mm.
because a water spout. This is why, like, Dave and I were often chat about supercellular and non-supercellular tornadoes. A water spout is a tornado, but it's a non-supercellular one.
Right.
So it goes up under. Quite often, you see them in the fall, because the lakes are fairly warm at that
That's
point
right.
compared to the land,
That's
right?
right.
So you'll often get these rapidly building cumulus clouds out over top of the water, and just give it a little bit of a spin, and you get a water spout. Those ones generally don't come on shore unless those clouds are moving. But you can also get, and I have seen, tornadoes, supercell tornadoes happen over water and come on shore.
Mm.
I know of two of them. The one was the Goderich tornado. If you remember that one from 2015, I believe it
Hmm.
was the Goderich EF2, or was it EF3? Sorry, I believe Goderich was EF3. That was an extremely damaging tornado, and we got extraordinarily lucky that day,
Mm.
that tornado came through when it did, because it was formed from the collision of a couple of what we call outflow boundaries off of a couple of storms that had formed earlier in the day. And because those storms had formed earlier in the day, the farmers market in the center downtown area of Goderich was empty. Everybody had gone home. It
Mm.
was scheduled to go to 6 o'clock or what have you. Well, the tornado that came through went directly over top of the center of town and destroyed buildings, like absolutely wrecked well-built buildings in there. Um, Tore down all the trees, sent big trailers flying. If people had still been there, the death toll would probably have been double digits, if not triple digits,
Wow.
that day. That's why I said we got extraordinarily lucky.
And did it develop
Um,
fast or?
it did. It developed very fast. But one of the things that the Great Lakes do is adds moisture to the
It
air.
does add
So
moisture.
yeah, so a lot of our tornadoes, or a lot of our thunderstorms in southern Ontario are what we call HP, or high precipitation storms. So the tornado's there, but it's wrapped with
Wrapped in
rain, so you
rain.
can't see
I
it,
know.
right? And that was Goderich. People
Oh, it
have
was
there's
wrapped, eh?
Yeah, people have footage of the tornado coming on shore. They were, at the beach, and they were filming this gray wall. That's all they could see. But there was weird waves coming out of it.
Oh.
And so this was the neat thing about it. But they couldn't see it. You could not see that tornado at all. There was some shots later when it went a little bit more classic. You could kind of see into it. But no, there was very little. The only warning we had was the radar was
Yeah.
showing extreme rotation within there. And so the tornado warning went out, and only because one of the senior guys at the Weather Network, or at the Weather Network, excuse me, at Environment Canada went past, looked at the radar, and said, "That's not right. Put a warning on that right now." And
Hmm.
the warning went up.
Yeah.
And because we weren't nobody was expecting anything at that point, because the front had gone through. It was, it's like, oh, okay, some thunderstorms, but nothing serious. Um, The other one was a supercell tornado that went up on a line of storms a couple of years ago. The tornado ended up being 1.3 kilometers across, and I have footage of it as I'm screaming down south to try and get sort of in front of it, and nearly drove into the thing.
Really?
So, oh yeah, yeah,
What
that was the
size?
Lucknow tornado. That was, I believe that one was classified as an EF1 or 2,
Hmm.
because it didn't hit very much. It hit like a chicken barn, and that
Wow.
was it. Again, we got extraordinarily lucky with that one. It
Yeah.
missed luck. It hit the southern edge of Lucknow. Um, but yeah, I nearly drove into it. But it was half wrapped up in rain, but you
Hmm.
could see it. You could see it, and I have footage of it. Actually, the funny thing is, if you look on the Weather Network app right now, there's a picture literally of that on the story I just did. So gives so yeah, it was a well-known one for me. That was a big day. That was a
Yeah.
big day. Yeah.
Oh, good stuff.
So yes, they do form over the lakes. It's more rare, but it can happen.
Right. Okay. Good to know. Good to know. Um, One of the best storm chasers online in the US is a guy named Pecos Hank. I don't know if you're familiar.
Yeah, I know Pecos. Yeah.
He once interviewed an academic storm researcher. I don't know if you know this gentleman, Dr. Lay Orff. I think he's at Wisconsin.
AR. I don't know that. I should know that name.
He's put together modeling techniques of storm development using supercomputers. Just incredible how
Yeah.
he's put together these simulated models of supercells in order to determine, in philosophy we call them sufficient conditions. What conditions are
Yeah.
sufficient in order to
Yeah.
bring about, right, a
Yeah.
tornado? So we're always interested, what are the sufficient conditions? We know what the necessary conditions are. We know you need
Yeah.
humidity and heat and all this kind of stuff, but what are the combined sufficient conditions? um, do you guys use, what kind of modeling do you use in trying to
Well,
determine where to be? Are you looking for, Doppler hooks? What exactly are you?
yeah, I mean, really, the big issue that we run into is that we really don't know why one supercell produces a tornado and another one doesn't.
Right.
Um, there's there's um, there's microphysics things going on that we can't necessarily one, um, sample that, to model it in any sort of time period that would be useful, and at the same time, to understand, you know, to say this storm is going to do this, we have to have almost perfect data,
Hmm.
which does not exist.
That's right.
So you end up with small errors in the beginning, end up being huge errors as you sort of go forward in time. It's basic chaos theory.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
so what we have to sort of do quite often is we can take a look at the radar and say, yep, that looks like a hook on there. That's a hook on a radar. Okay, let's go get underneath that, and it's not producing anything. Like,
Mm.
what's going on here? So again, one of the most critical things to getting to a tornado or seeing a tornado, or even being able to get near the storm that's producing a tornado, is your brain.
Yeah.
It's the Mark 1 eyeball,
Yeah.
and sort of understanding what the storm is doing, and really changing your perception of the storm as it's ongoing.
Hmm.
You can't say, oh, that storm is doing this, therefore it's going to do this. It
Hmm.
doesn't work like that. It's more like it's doing this right now, but it might do something completely weird in a minute from now.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's why there's a constant sort of staying on your toes, and always looking around, especially if you're sort of under the dangerous part of the storm.
Hmm.
Now, having said that, though, there are general cases. If it's not a supercell tornado, if it doesn't have a core that's spinning, it's probably not going to produce a tornado. If it's got you can see that quite easily. If there's no wall cloud, probably not going to produce a tornado. But if the wall cloud is extremely well developed and spinning like a top, get ready, here it comes.
Hmm.
Um, and we also know that, Now, 90% of the supercell tornadoes do not come out of weird parts of the storm. They're going to come out of that one area. So
That's
your
right.
idea is get to that one area, try to be behind and maybe south of it if it's going north. And be close but not in is the
Yes.
way I do it. I
Yeah, yeah.
know a lot of chasers nowadays want to be in and under, and I'm waiting for
Ew.
the tragedy, the tragedy of a big, EF4 style,
I
400
know.
kilometer an hour winds going straight down a line of chasers.
Yeah.
And it's inevitable. I don't want to be a part of it.
No, same
And I
here.
hope it doesn't happen. But I think it's inevitable given the sheer numbers of
Yep.
people and this idea in the States, especially in the States,
Mm.
of the fame and fortune attached to, you know, getting that shot,
Getting
being that guy.
that unique shot. That's what our
Yeah,
video producer Troy here wants to be able to capture is
yeah.
to
Well,
get that
I
one
can,
shot.
that jumps into a whole other, can of worms when you're dealing with that. I mean, the science side is actually relatively simple to deal with. But when it comes to people, that gets a lot more complex.
I know. I went out a few years ago. I was at a local establishment here having dinner with friends. The Albion. I don't know if you've ever been there.
Oh, I know the Albion.
So,
I know it well.
Al Capone used to frequent the Albion
Yeah, yeah.
and smuggle wine and stuff out, but to Chicago. But anyhow, we're having dinner there, and waiter comes by, and he knows who I am, and he said, "So you going? What are you talking about? "Uh, Tornado watch, eh? What? Yeah, just Kitchener right now. What are you talking about? Yeah, yeah, I just heard it." So I look at the couple and I say, "I gotta go. I gotta go." And but we drove. I said, can I use your vehicle?
Oh no.
Well, maybe we can all just finish up and go together. So we
Oh
do.
no.
And we head out. And we go to my favorite starting spot, which is outside of Kitchener on the way to what is it, Bridgetown?
Oh,
Bridgeport.
Bridgeport. Yeah,
Yeah. Because you can see forever, right? You can see
yeah, yeah.
all the
I think
way.
I think I know where you are actually.
So it's a great place to start when you're looking at the maps and you're saying, okay, okay, it's here, it's here. Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. So you go there and here's this shelf. But here's four cars. Here's some other chasers that I've never seen before, rookies essentially. And they're
Yeah.
sitting on top of their car on leaning against their windshield, waiting for the action to happen. I'm thinking, guys, do you even know what could happen here? But anyhow, the gentleman uh, that was with me, he gets out to have a cigarette. And my wife's like, should he be out there? I said, hey, he's a farm boy. He's probably seen tons of storms like this. This is nothing to him. At that moment, lightning hits the telephone pole right beside him and sends a shower of sparks down.
Oh
And
no.
these chasers across the road scamper into their car and hightail it out of there. He brushes it off like it's nothing. Gets back in the car.
Oh my God.
All right, are we
I've had a
good to
couple
go?
of those. Yeah.
So it's funny. I do worry about chasers who might not have enough science behind them and they're just
Yeah.
out there for the thrill, right? And they don't
Yeah.
know how to read a sky and they don't know enough about the meteorological, background that you have to be familiar with on some level to position yourself in that kind of southwestern corner, right? To be able to watch
Yeah.
it track northeast. But
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is an issue we're seeing coming up in the States more and more.
mhm,
I haven't been down in a couple of, more years than I'd like to commit to, but it was because of COVID. We had the borders closed for a
that's
long
right.
time, and
That's
I
right.
didn't, at that point we just shut everything down.
Hmm.
And I've been sort of, waiting to get across the border again and a whole bunch of stuff. So I haven't been down in a little while. But some of my, obviously, I've got American friends that are out there,
Yeah.
and they've been telling me that it's become almost intolerable down there because you'll get 100, 200 cars on one storm, and a lot of these people are well, one, just the sheer traffic is a problem.
Yeah,
But on top of that, you've got a bunch of people that are trying to be the one, the
I know.
guy, like, in his clothes. I zero metered that storm. I zero metered that tornado. Um, and this is becoming a problem
It
because
is.
there's been multiple car accidents and deaths, traffic deaths, in the last couple of years because people are not paying attention,
No.
um, thinking that they're number one, so they come first and nobody else is important.
Mhm.
And I find that happens more in the States. You're also seeing people wrecking their lives. You see a lot of people are like, "Oh, I've maxed out all my credit cards." Um, yeah, it's not a good thing, man. Like he's like, "I'm maxing out my credit cards and I'm gonna get my own TV show real soon." And it's like, no, you're not.
No.
Like, no, you're not. That sort of like I again, people are adults, they can do what they want,
Yep.
but it's
Yep.
I worry about this idea, and then unfortunately, then you get people sniping at each other kind of thing, just getting angry with each other, trying because everybody's trying for that fame and fortune.
That's right.
Um, and you like I had a story from a friend of mine this year, got underneath one of these unbelievable storms, right? Like unbelievable shot, like of the tornado, right in front of beautiful white cone, everything, amazing stuff. Oh my God, just beautiful shot. And I was like, wow, like that. I was like, that's like a once a year, if you're incredibly lucky, once every 5 years shot. And I said, man, you must have made a ton of money off that. No, he's like, I got $1,500. I was like, excuse me, you got what?
Wow.
He's like, yeah, well, there's so many other people at the same shot. And I
Oh,
was like,
right.
oh, this is a problem now.
It's
Um, you
saturated.
know,
Yeah.
it's so saturated that you can't get you can't get money off of it.
Mm.
So so it's almost like a death spiral.
Hmm.
People try to get closer. People try to get the better shot. Oh, I got to get that shot. I got to get this. I got to get that. I got to do better. Got to do better. And then people just and people end up driving into the tornado and
Ah,
getting killed. Or what's happening and what worries me now much more is that people are switching from, and I've been doing this for since 2004, going into hurricanes. Um,
mm.
and I've always said to people that of the two types of chasing, hurricane chasing is much extraordinarily much more dangerous, because you're in the worst of the worst of the worst.
That's right.
And you really, really have to know what you're doing when it comes to hurricanes and not
Hmm.
panic and etc. But now you got a bunch of people who aren't making money at the tornadoes who now switch and go down to hurricanes. So
Hmm.
now what we're finding is I get down to the hurricanes. I've got my spot picked out, and I get there, and there's 50 people already there.
Wow.
Um, and I'm like, well, one, what's going on here? And two, I was actually talking to one guy. I said, okay, so have you got food and water? And he goes, I said, do you know why you're in the parking garage? He had no clue. He's like, oh, I've got a couple of bottles of water, and a rain jacket and my camera. And I'm like, this is a this is a this is a this is a five. This is a
Yeah,
category five hurricane coming at you. You could be trapped here for 3 days.
that's right.
Have you got water and food for that? No. I said, then you need to get the hell out. Like
Yeah.
right now, you have no idea what you're doing. You shouldn't be here. I haven't got food for you. Like I have enough for my team for a week, but and we have gas and we have all this. We are prepared for this because we've
Yeah.
been through many of them. And so this is what this increasing thing that I'm seeing is more and more people that don't know what they're doing,
Hmm.
are going into far more dangerous situations.
Hmm.
Um, Having said that, and I keep saying this, I'm one of the ones that drives people to go and do this.
Yeah. Yeah, they want
Like
to be like you, of
yeah,
course.
I'm as guilty as anybody else of being part of being that the horde of chasers that are there.
Well,
Yeah, I mean,
you make it look good, sir. You make it
oh,
look
good Lord, no. Um, well, and like, but this, so like, it's almost me being a bit hypocritical by saying, oh, you shouldn't be there, and meanwhile, I'm going to go
Yeah,
do
but
it.
this is your job, right? Like If anybody
Yeah,
should be there, we want people like you, right? We want people trained in the science and has the field experience and right is well
yeah.
prepared, has the equipment. Yeah, you know. But it's become since I've been down Tornado Alley in the States, I've noticed that online there's advertisements. People do this for tourism. They
Yeah.
they
Oh
go
yeah.
down they go down and connect with some group who takes them out. I don't know how qualified these groups are to take people out. I
I
don't know what their insurance is like, right? If
I
at
I
all.
actually I actually know a lot of these guys.
Oh, is that right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Charles Edwards was running Cloud9 Tours. It was one of the oldest ones in the alley.
Ah,
And Charles had been running that since the mid 1990s.
wow.
So Charles definitely knew what he was doing. Like he shut it down a couple of years ago because he retired.
Right.
It was hard on him. It was really hard on him. And it wasn't like he made a lot of money at it. He wasn't making a ton of money. He did it because one, it paid for his chasing, and two, he just loved to show off tornadoes to everybody.
Oh, cool.
Um, so Charles, like I would trust Charles with my life. And my friend George Karunas drove for him for years. And George is another one of these guys. I have trusted George with my life more than once. He and I jumped into two volcanoes together.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
oh yeah,
Cool.
yeah. So those guys I would trust, but we did see an increase in these sort of more fly by night, companies that didn't know what they were doing.
Yeah.
And some people got like I've seen multiple tour groups with their trucks were rolled by the tornado.
Wow.
Um, and we've been lucky that people weren't injured so far.
Hmm.
Or sorry, let me rephrase. We're lucky that people were only injured and not killed so far. So yeah, I mean, again, that's one of the things I often recommend to people as I say, look, if you want to go tornado chasing, by all means, go and do it. But you really have to learn. You have to know your meteorology. You really have to understand this. And I would suggest, or go with a tour group.
Yeah.
Find a reputable tour group and have them take you. The chances are, if you just go out on your own, it's not that you're going to get run over by a tornado. It's that you're not going to see anything, because you have no idea what you're doing.
That's it.
So you're very unlikely to see anything but some rain.
Hmm.
Um, and or you might panic and then cause trouble for me as I'm driving down the road and suddenly you're panicking and pulling a U-turn in front of me. Um,
Hmm.
so I often say go with a tour group. Make sure you know that they've got a good reputation. I would always recommend Cloud9 because I know
Yep.
Charles. And that's a good way for people to get the experience that they need before they try it on their own.
Hmm. Hmm. Um, on a road trip, used to do road trips every year with my girlfriend, now wife, and went through South Dakota and went through a pretty nasty tornado storm. And outside of Fort Worth in Texas, saw something kind of forming, got out of the vehicle to take more and more pictures of it. And one started forming in front of us. And I turned around, my wife was running. She's gone back to the vehicle. I'm still taking pictures as I'm running. Have you ever had any close encounters that made you seriously question what you do for a living and that maybe you shouldn't?
I've never like I've had lots of close encounters.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I've had lots of those.
Yeah.
El Reno, I was in El Reno for the El Reno tornado. And that was a scary, scary day.
Yeah.
Um I've had a couple of close encounters here in Ontario, but never any that's made me go, I shouldn't be doing this anymore.
Right.
Like I'm always fascinated by all of it. It's just amazing to see. All of it is just incredible. I'll probably be doing this until they nail the last nail into my coffin.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
but definitely close encounters happen. El Reno, we had to, as it swept towards us, we didn't realize that it was 4.5 kilometers wide. So we bailed out of there with about a minute to spare, and it went right behind us.
And
Uh,
whereabouts was that?
El Reno, Oklahoma.
In
Uh,
Oklahoma. Right.
yeah, it was 2013.
Mm.
That was the one that killed Tim Samaras, Carl, and Tim's son. The three of them were in the car,
That's
and
right.
they started out almost right where we were. When we figured out where he went east, we went south.
Mm.
So he must have been right like he must have been right beside us as he went east and we went south.
And
He
these are
sort of figured,
experienced people, right?
you don't get much more experience than
I
Jim
know.
Samaras.
I know.
Um, and um, and so that was a scary day.
Hmm.
Especially like that was also a good example of a chaotic situation and chaotic information because we were down south and I believe it was not Lawton. Anyway, we're south of El Reno and we just finally stopped because the storms had finally swept past us and then we started hearing and we couldn't get north again because they were closing roads and stuff like
Yeah,
that,
right.
so we were just sort of we were in one spot waiting and trying to get a hold of our friends like because our friend group, like our chase group, got completely scattered everywhere.
Yeah.
So we were sort of just trying to get everybody into, so by the time everyone got back together we were hearing these rumors of this giant tornado that had gone through Oklahoma City, and Oklahoma City was wrecked, and the death toll was in the thousands, and blah 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 blah. Of course, none of that was true. We just had the big El Reno tornado go through. I believe there was four people killed in that one, if five, maybe five. It was the biggest tornado on record, at 4.5 kilometers wide.
Wow.
Um, and what had happened in Oklahoma City was just the storms had gone through there, and they had produced a tremendous amount of rain. But at the same time, you could look on radar and see this, like a tornado signature sweeping right over top of Oklahoma City. So there was some information to believe that this had actually happened, but the
Mm.
reality was it hadn't actually happened. But we were hearing these rumors. We were seeing, emergency vehicles running all over the place. We were seeing mass evacuations. Well, I mean, we literally counted like 1,000 cars going past this. We were just sort of sitting in this parking garage watching 1,000 cars go past us fleeing south.
Yeah.
And what had happened was a meteorologist in Oklahoma had said, if you're in Oklahoma, you need to evacuate and flee south. And what he meant was, if you're driving, go
Yeah.
south out of the way of the storms. But people heard this, and half the city don't empty, right?
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, it was really kind of a fascinating study
yeah,
in how people deal with extreme situations,
for
and
sure.
how information flows, and how
Yeah,
it
yeah.
was really quite fascinating. Um, and this sort of event, that was a big event. And then there's been a lot of events where I nearly get struck by lightning. I've had a few of those happen.
Hmm.
And then of course all the hurricanes. um when we were in hurricane, and they all sort of blur. I've been through 26 hurricanes.
Hmm.
um Not a Dahlia, Ian. I believe it was Ian, a
Hmm.
couple of years ago. We were in Punta Gorda, and we were the eye came directly over top of us,
Right.
and the sort of the northern eye wall, or the eastern eye wall, went over top of us. Strong winds, debris flying, everything else. Kind of amazing. Um, then the eye happens, and we're in the eye. Okay, this is cool.
So it's
We're
very
walking.
calm
It's totally calm.
yeah.
All the
Could you see
chasers
blue
sort of,
sky? Could you?
no, not
No,
quite. It was we didn't quite get the stadium, because they start to break down as they come
that's
on
true. Yeah.
shore, so you immediately get the eye closing. Um, so we were sort of wandering around filming, and oh my God, talking with the other chasers and stuff like that. And you could see the other side of the eye. You could actually see the other eye wall. It was like a gray, dark grayish blue. You know the color.
Oh, yeah.
Uh, so we're watching that. We're like, the front side is always the side that's stronger, like the one that we've already been through. That's the side that's usually stronger. We could probably stay out here and film this as it comes in because the front side was pretty good. But if this is weaker, we'll probably be okay. A lot of the debris is down. We can sort of hide behind this building right here and experience the winds and that kind of thing. And then our cameraman, it was Jacqueline Whittle and myself. And Jack's the co-host for Storm Hunters, and I've been through like every hurricane with her. If of every hurricane for the last, about, I would say, last 5-10 years. Um, and so Dave's like, "Oh man, I'm getting really wet. Sort of raining and spitting rain in the eye and stuff." Dave's like, it's getting kind of wet, and camera's getting kind of wet. Let's go back into the parking garage where I can dry things off, and we'll just do it from there." We're like, yeah, all right, Dave, we'll do that. And so we went back, and then the Western Eye Wall hit. and was probably 3 times stronger than
Gee.
the eastern eye wall. Yeah, all my footage that I like, the most incredible footage I got from that hurricane was from the western eye wall, not the eastern eye wall. When that western eye wall hit, it just pulled, like it was just debris was flying. There were signs flying through the air.
Oh,
You
wow.
couldn't see across the street. I mean, it was unbelievable. We were just like, and so if we hadn't walked, it would have been, I can't even imagine what might have happened to us had we
Yeah.
stayed out there the way we were thinking would. Because even on radar, it didn't look that good. And it was like, what is going on? So yeah, we got lucky on that one. So,
Luck is a factor. There's no
oh
question.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that
Now,
was a close one as
with
well.
all the uncertainty about storm development, chaos theory, right?
Yeah,
Lorentzian, butterfly effects and that sort of
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Is anybody doing anything with AI? Is it being incorporated into modeling?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. We've been seeing a little bit more of it sort of in the last little while
Hmm.
because of its skill with pattern recognition
Yeah,
and
right.
its ability in its speed to understand those patterns. Like humans are pattern recognition machines. Like we're really really good at that, but we can't necessarily do it at the speed of say an AI type of system. Um, there's definitely research going on with it right now. I can't speak to how good it is because I think that we're only in the early stages of really understanding it.
Right.
Um, but there's definitely some sort of experimental products that are now out there that sort of look at a day, given this pattern, this is where I think the tornadoes will be.
Right.
And you can sort of look at that and sort of it will give you an idea. How well verified that is, I don't know. Again, I think, it's definitely a tool that's being used, but we don't
Mhm.
have a good verification on it yet,
Yeah, it's so
as
it's so
far as I
new.
understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it is so new.
And
I
the
mean, I can see it being very useful,
yeah,
but again, because of the lack of ability to get every single piece of data that you need into the computer models, into the AI models. And that's again, your error 5 minutes out is very tiny, but your error, say 5 hours out, is huge. And
exactly.
that's just because we haven't got perfect data collection,
Hmm.
and we haven't necessarily got perfect algorithms to understand that.
That's right.
So how do perturbations happen? That's why we use ensemble models.
Yeah.
And that sort of gives us the best shot at it. How AI changes ensembles and how AI changes forecasting, I we don't know yet. Again, it's just so new.
Hmm.
And given that the atmosphere is one of the more complex systems out there,
It
it's
is.
going to take a while for things to sort of settle out and understand. But with the speed at which AI is changing and how fast it's getting better, um, we may be in some ways unprepared, joyfully unprepared for how fast this may change weather forecasting.
I know. I'm optimistic. I'm hopeful. Any data that can be cranked into a system for diagnostic and predictive measures, AI will do better than humans every time. So,
Yeah, yeah.
as long as we
And
manage to give it the right type of data and let it do its thing, then I think we'll
yeah,
be
but I think, like that therein lies the problem. As long as we give it the right type of data. When you're dealing with a chaotic system like an atmospheric system on a large
Mhm.
scale, it's probably going to do quite well. But when you get into thunderstorms and the data that we're trying to hand to the system isn't perfect, then
No.
it's going to make the same mistakes we make, only at
Mhm.
a much faster rate. Now, having again, like this, it could be, and I think we're still in the early stages of it. It could be that we're wrong, or that I'm wrong,
Mhm.
and that it gets really good at understanding. When we have this type of thunderstorm, we get this type of this is where it's going to go.
Right.
And if you throw in 100 or 200 storms that are like that thunderstorm, the data from 100 storms, it may be able to pick out those a little
Yeah.
bit better
Yeah.
than we can. But do we have that data? Do we have those data sets yet? Not necessarily. And
Mhm.
I don't think we do. And I don't, and I'm hesitant to say that we ever will be able to easily, because we don't have the data collecting devices out
Mhm.
there that we
Mhm.
need. When we talk about something like a mesonet, right, which is basically, a suite of instruments of anemometers and barometers that are sort of spread out over a large area.
Mhm.
Great, that's better data. But there's only a few places with anything like that,
Right.
Oklahoma being one. And even then, we're talking about kilometer grid spacing. you know, like there could be a lot happening between data point, X and data point Y here,
Right.
right? So what's happening in there? So if we put more instruments in there, we get better data. Um, but how we get that data in, I mean, again, this could be sort of looked at, post hoc, so afterwards we get a chance to sort of put that data in and take a look.
Yeah.
So, I think it's going to take a while for us to literally get that data into
Mm.
an AI model or an AI system. Like right now, when we train AI on, and again, I'm not an expert in this by any stretch of the imagination, but being a writer as well, we train AI on a lot of stuff that people have already written. There is terabytes of data like that. Do we have terabytes of data when it comes to thunderstorms and the microphysics of thunderstorms? We just don't have that yet.
Right.
So if we start to get that data and we can train the AI on better and better data, um, my I'm willing to bet that yeah, that may change everything.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, yeah. I'm actually
That's
quite excited and optimistic and looking forward to what AI might bring to the table in this regard.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a science fiction writer as well.
Ah.
And AI has always been, like it's always come up in sci-fi. And I got a few of my friends are well-known Canadian science fiction writers. And so I go to a conference in Ottawa, writers conference in Ottawa every year,
Oh.
that I'm a part of called CanCon. Um, and we have these discussions. You get a bunch of science fiction writers together, and we always talk about AI, and what we think of it,
Yeah.
and how where it's going, etc. And I think you run into a lot of moral and political issues when you're dealing with rehashing art or creating art.
Mhm.
But when it comes to say predicting storms and increasing the warning time that we get for these storms, there's much less moral and philosophical arguments. uh, you do get into the philosophical arguments of using AI to say replicate me out in the field, or one of the things we're working on at the Weather Network right now is AI studio. So people in the studio, which can be replicated fairly easily.
Right.
Um, Now it hasn't turned out to be quite as good as we were expecting, um, but we're working away on it, and we're testing it. We're just sort of seeing, can we use somebody's facial and and voice and everything else, and train this AI on this person to get them to give us the weather forecast.
Mhm.
Um, and maybe but we're not trying to use a predictive model. It's just like to try and do forecasting.
Right.
We're using it just to, replace somebody in the studio.
Hmm.
So there's two very different aspects when it comes to the
Absolutely.
weather, and
Yeah.
the Weather Network when it comes to this.
Interesting. Good. All right, sir. Final question. This summer has been hot and humid.
Yeah,
We had the earliest level 5 hurricane, I think, in recorded history.
yeah. It was the furthest east, Category 5 in the Atlantic Basin.
Right. Right.
Yeah, and I believe it may have been the earliest Cat 5 or major hurricane in the Atlantic Basin as well. I'd have to look that up,
Mm.
but I know that it did break some records. Beryl was
Yeah,
definitely something unexpected.
it was. It was.
Yeah.
Given that we're seeing category 5s this early, What are your predictions for the summer of 2024? Do you think we're going to see a lot of action? Do you think it's revving up to be kind of
I can
interesting?
I can tell you that it probably won't snow on July 31st. I mean that like that's always a question that comes up constantly, and it's a question like even in my mind that comes up constantly, because I want to know what's going to happen. If we're going to have a very active year, are we going to? But the issue with that is that just because you have an active beginning to the season, it doesn't necessarily mean that will continue to be
Exactly.
active. We really don't know. So um, when it comes to hurricanes, just because we had an early and devastating and unbelievably powerful hurricane early in the season, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to continue like that.
That's right.
But the parameters around, like we look at the extremely warm ocean temperatures, we look at the fact that we're sort of heading towards a La Nina, which tends to foster development in the Atlantic basin. If we sort of see where the Bermuda High is sitting, the Saharan air layer is not outbreaking as hard. Um, those are the things that you can sort of look forward and say, yeah, these are the things that drive an active season. Um, when it comes to tornadoes and active thunderstorm season, that's much trickier to do
It is.
because tornadoes and thunderstorms are a little bit much smaller scale than hurricanes. We can't necessarily say absolutely we're going to have an active season. Um, but what we are watching is sort of where the heat dome was setting up.
Right.
Um, and you can get thunderstorms firing along the edge of that heat dome, and we call it sort of the ring of fire.
Mm.
And where that sits sort of tells us where the storms are going to be. This year, some of our seasonal forecasts said that ring of fire may be just south of Windsor, and that's kind of what we've been seeing.
Yeah.
So a lot of those storms have been just south of us, as opposed to being in southern Ontario. Hurricane Beryl, same thing. They all went literally just south of the lakes.
That's
So
right.
a lot of the storms that we've been seeing have been happening literally right up to our edge, but not quite in southern Ontario.
Hmm.
Um, and again, though, if that changes in late July and August, that'll change the calculus completely.
Hmm.
We could have an absolutely unbelievable late July and August and just,
Hmm.
storm after storm after storm. But again, it's impossible to say at this point.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we'll just have to wait and see. And
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to getting out in the field with you and chasing
Yeah. Yeah.
it with you. And
Yeah.
we'll see what we can film this summer.
Yeah.
I'm excited. And there's always that sense of thrill that you get, eh? When the chase is on, right? It's
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
unmistakable. It's
Yeah.
like a
Well, hey,
drug.
I'm watching Monday. I'm watching Sunday, Monday, Tuesday.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
we'll see. I mean, there's the parameters are sort of inching better as of usually with Southern Ontario, it's like looks incredible and then just goes bleh. By the time you get to the day of, it's just where did my
Well,
incredible day go?
well, we'll
But
see. We'll see. And
but
we may see you out
Monday
there.
Monday's doing the opposite. Monday it was started off sort of and it's like, oh, wait a minute, that's getting a little more interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of our big days so far this are interesting days. Not to say we haven't had a really, really big day. A lot of our interesting days this year have been last minute, like, what? Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Today I'm gonna go out today.
Right.
So
Right.
that's been the story this year.
Oh, good stuff. Well, we hope to see you out there and get some field footage that we can bring into this conversation, to this discussion. And look, I want to thank you
Oh,
for taking the time to speak with me today. I really appreciate
oh no, I appreciate you taking the time to listen to me babble on because
that.
it's hard to get me to shut up.
No, much appreciated. And thanks again. I look forward to seeing you out there.
No problem. Me too.
All right. Take care.